Greetings in Jesus' name this morning, and Happy New Year to each one that's gathered in today to worship. A new year, a new you, right? Well, I guess, I'll try something a little different this morning. I have already for some time thought I should wear my eyewear to preach, because basically I can see well in the back for everyone that comes in the back, but my arm or the pulpit was no longer far enough away for me. I was basically reading with one eye for some time when I'm up here, so this helps me quite a bit. And if ever the lights would have lost power in the church and I would have been preaching, I probably would have had some real issues reading. So hopefully this will go well for me. I do wear them some at home, but mostly they are beside the chair, and any time that I read, I wear them. So I don't know if this is a new chapter that I'll wear them continually. I'm not sure I intend to do that yet, but they are a real blessing when it comes to reading. So, yeah, I thought there for a while, what's the big deal? Why don't you just start? Why don't you just do it? And well, I don't know. What is it in our lives that is a little bit of pride? Why, what is it that took me so long to? I've already owned them for 2 years, I think, or something like that. So, what took me so long to wear them? When I guess maybe a little bit of pride, or I don't know what it is for sure, but you probably put your finger on that a little bit. And then I thought about it. Well, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm showing my age, which probably was part of the issue. You get to that age where you need them. So then I thought, well, I have a son that's been wearing eyewear since he's 3 years old, so he never had an issue with it. He needed them, so he wears them faithfully. So so we'll see if I'll start. I don't know if I'll. Day to day, I don't. Most part I'm good, but for reading, I'm not. So again, as we think about a new year and new opportunities, this is not necessarily a New Year's message, but as some time ago, I was at a congregation within probably the last half year, and I'm not sure what I shared there or what the message was per se, but I did get a note from one of the congregants there. I don't remember for sure what that note said, but it was a challenge to me in my ministry, or to maybe our churches, that maybe as Anabaptists or as Mennonites, there's a principle or there's a doctrine that we uphold or try to uphold, and that we are known for, maybe somewhat. But this individual challenged me in my ministry that if we want to be continually be known in this way, that we need to maybe teach it more, or it'll be lost, or we don't teach it enough. So this morning, as I thought, thinking about this for a few weeks, as I thought about the first message that I get to preach of the year, I thought maybe, it'd be a good time to address the challenge that was put to me about maybe we don't preach or share on it enough. So the title of the message this morning is The Second Mile. I invite you to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, and before I start reading, we're going to start reading towards the end of the chapter. As we know it in the New Testament, there's time and time again Jesus or Paul or the Gospels warns us time and time again as we get towards the end times that times may change and will change, and that there's always many times it gives us a warning about maybe persecutions to come, And so with that, as we think about that, we are known as Anabaptists, or as something that the Mennonites, or way back to the early movement or the Reformation, we are known to be a non-resistant people. So that's kind of the thrust of what we want to look at here this morning. And the challenge was put to me that if we want to continue to be that and to be known as that, we need to teach it more into our people. So that's what we're going to try to do this morning. So I invite you to Matthew chapter 5. We'll start reading at verse 38, and we'll read to the end of the chapter. Verse 38. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor, and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that they may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. As we think about this passage here, of course, the Sermon on the Mount here is a powerful, the most powerful or the lengthiest sermon or teaching of Jesus Christ as he was here on earth, and as he shared many different aspects of life and many different areas of life that the new dispensation, new teachings. So we do see that this is in our reading this morning, that is a new teaching that Jesus was bringing to the people. Now, as we think about what he is saying in verse 38, he goes back to the Old Testament, and he says, Ye have heard, ye have been taught, or ye have been heard, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, to some of us, that would seem very harsh. And as I thought about that, and the Old Testament law of maybe retaliation, it's not so much. Somewhere in my studies, it said it's the Old Testament law of retaliation. Yes, in a way it was. But this morning, I want us to understand that it was not just a free-for-all retaliation, though. There was quite detailed teachings, or quite detailed reservation to what that punishment may be. It wasn't just, well, you gored out my eye, and therefore I have that I'm allowed to gore out your eye, or something has happened to me. There was a certain amount of laws put in place, that it wasn't just you had to, for certain amounts of retaliation, or certain amounts of the eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, you had to come before a judge or before a group of people. It wasn't just that you on your own volition could go out and retaliate and mete out this Old Testament teaching of eye for eye and tooth for tooth. Can you imagine the chaos that could come from a society that operates and lives by that principle? So there was and we say, well, non-resistance is and we will see here, is quite opposite from that. But the non-resistance itself, peace. Let's talk about peace is the absence of strife. Non-resistant relates to our attitude and life in the midst of strife. So it's how we, as we talk about, or as we share on the idea or the doctrine or the ordinance of non-resistance this morning, it's not so much that we never have strife or we never encounter these things in life, But the teaching and the thrust we want to get out of our Bible reading this morning is it's the attitude and the life or the witness that we have in the midst of enduring these things is where the difference or where the true test comes for all of us. And I don't know if this morning, as we think about non-resistance, or as we think about that doctrine, it more refers to the male or to the men or to the ladies, not necessarily. But we all have our own nature to work with, and some of these, and as we talk about non-resistance, there is probably some of us that maybe because of the nature within us that God has given, the God-given nature within us, that some of us have more of a struggle to live this out and to be a true witness of what has taken place in our hearts. So the Old Testament law of verse 38 was not a free-for-all retaliation of crime for crime. There were certain things that you had to come before the judges, and there wasn't just you meted out. You were automatically given that right for all of it. And you can read about that in Exodus and Leviticus if you're interested in reading a lot about the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But we see here in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus very distinctly in verse 39 says, "But I say unto you." There's a new thought or a new teaching that Jesus wanted the people to understand here, and this is the verse that we get the word non-resistance from, or the thought or the word that ye resist not evil. Resist not, basically non-resistance. That is the key verse where us as Anabaptists or as Mennonites, where we would use this verse, where we get the doctrine or where we get the verse that we would use to where Jesus specifically instructs us to have there's a new teaching here, a new concept, a new way, a new lifestyle, a new teaching that is coming to the people. So that is verse 39 here is bringing in that new thought, and we want to take a closer look at it this morning. So there's 4 different areas in these few verses that Jesus talks about the addresses when it comes to the idea of resisting not. And we're going to take a brief look at each one of them. And I feel at times that in our circles or in the day and age that we live in, of course, that when we hear the word non-resistance, that we think automatically of being a peaceable person or a peace-loving person and not wanting to or not able to serve in any way, shape, or form in any military endeavors, which is a part of being non-resistance. But we'll see this morning as we look at these few verses, it is far more than that. Non-resistance is a doctrine that I'm barely going to have the time to really do justice to it in one message this morning. But as I thought about that, when we go directly to the teachings of the Master, Jesus Christ, we can gain a lot out of these few verses here this morning when it addresses 4 different areas in our lives where we're supposed to resist not, as we see them here in these few verses we're going to look at. So the first one here is we can find in verse 39, and that is, "Whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also." The idea here this morning again is that when opposition comes. Now I know within myself that when opposition comes, or when I think that my rights or my maybe not my rights or my character or my rights and my character, or when I'm under a personal attack, whether it's physically by smiting on the cheek or by the attack of my character or whatever it is, something within me and probably something within you wants to well up and wants to automatically become on guard, and something wells up within you where we would say maybe like a chicken, like a banty, and we want to fluff our feathers, and we want to protect who we are, and this idea of smiting or the physical attacks that can come to us will at times, and will many times, as the response that comes out of that will shed light or shed a tremendous amount of light on the character of who you and I operate under. Because when we come under physical attack or in any way, shape, or form, there is that feeling within. I think most of you all have red blood, right, like I do. A feeling within us that at times we want to well up, or whether it's true or untrue, there's something within us that wants to protect or to maybe go to bat on maybe whether it's true or maybe there's some untruth to it. We want to. It goes against human nature to turn the other cheek. That is so true. Well, Jesus Christ came right down to the truth of the matter. Is it goes against my grain. It goes against the humanistic, the Adamic nature, or the nature put within unregenerated man wants to retaliate and wants to get even, or we don't. We like to refuse to turn the other cheek when we come under physical attack. So when a person, when we don't resist, or when we don't have non-resistance, and we want to strike back instead of turning the other cheek, a person proves he has very little trust in God's keeping power when he resorts to violence to save himself. Is the thought that I would like to, as I studied and as I prepared for this, when we resort to violence, when we just want to strike back and we want to get even and we want to definitely not turn the other cheek, we prove to the individual or unfortunately many times there's other people around us, and we mar our testimony by lashing out and striking back when we could in a beautiful way put our trust in God's keeping power and resist and not resort to violence and allowing maybe ourselves to turn the other cheek, and maybe if there is untruth, waiting or just why would I have to lash back and settle the score right then and there? If there is untruth shared, why couldn't I bear it and come back at a later time, not in retaliation, but just coming back and dialoguing with that person later, not in a retaliatory way, and saying, what you said wasn't necessarily true, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But when we well up within ourselves and we want to strike back and we want to get even and get vengeance right then and there, or especially in a physical way, we prove to God that we don't trust in His keeping power, and we want to resort to violence to save ourselves. So that's number one, where Jesus addresses the new doctrine, the new way of living, which is called resist not non-resistance. Verse 40 is the second one. That could be called legal suits. As we think about, it's talking about, if any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. This here again is talking about maybe some vengeance or retaliation. In the day and age that you and I live in, our cost of living is probably, I don't know, have any idea what it would be. Our cost of living is, I'm sure, to some degree higher than it actually would have to be because of all the legal suits and all the insurances and all the coverage that we have to carry in the day and age that we live to protect our businesses or to some degree our livelihood, because of the quickness to be taken to court in legal suits, and in that way we've been injured, or we have this or that or that other thing has happened, at your place of business or at your residence or whatever that may be. And here Jesus, apparently it was an issue in the day and age where they lived at. And here he's addressing that how the Christian or how the person that you and I should respond to as a Christian. To Christians in this dispensation, as we're talking about the New Testament era that we live in, God gives a higher call, a call to suffer oppression and let him be the avenger. But that is so hard to do. And as we think about, it talks about a coat and a cloak. The coat would be considered the outer garment, and the cloak would be maybe the inner garment. And as we think about I think the encouragement, or I hopefully not take it out of context here, as we think about legal suits and the day and age that we live in, that we as a people, when it comes to settling suits or legal suits in the day and age that we live in, do we come with the attitude? What is the attitude, or what is the motivation and the attitude that if I'm facing legal suits in the day and age that we live, whether it's a small or somewhat large one, what is the attitude that as a Christian that I should have? I want to challenge you as I challenge myself. Is the attitude that just because there's opposition against me in a lawsuit, that I need to go out and acquire the best and most expensive lawyer there is to be had to protect what I think is all mine and I legally is mine? So the challenge I think that Jesus had for the day and age that he was living with is, what's the attitude, or what is coming out of when we face these type of things in our society today, when legal suits would want to crop up against us? What is the attitude that comes through? Yes, at times we need, maybe at times we need to protect ourselves to some. I'm not saying that having a lawyer is, I'm not saying this morning that hiring a lawyer may be wrong. But what is the attitude, or what is the most pressing motivation behind the fact that I'm going to go out and hire the best, most expensive lawyer so that I don't suffer any loss? Hopefully you get what through the teachings of Jesus, that I won't suffer any loss. I'll come out of this costing me nothing except maybe the fees and many times I believe that when we come to some of these law issues, that when we come when we go the avenue of the best lawyer that I can afford, that at the end of the day, till they're done working for you, it might cost you as much in legal fees as it would have done to settle outside of court, with a cost that would allow our testimony and our principle behind of settling outside of court, allowing maybe to suffer some oppression. But you and I myself, I don't like oppression. The flesh don't like oppression. I don't like oppression. I don't like, and therefore it goes against the human nature that you and I deal with on a day-to-day basis. We don't want to suffer loss, and we try our best to avoid it. But what is the attitude when, in the day and age that we live in, when legal suits may come? What is the attitude, or what comes forth out of my life as a Christian when we are faced with something like that I don't want to suffer any oppression or I want to go back and countersue or have retaliation, have vengeance and retaliation with a countersuit? Or can I come forward and realize that hey, maybe I need to suffer loss to allow, and probably suffer loss to allow the witness of who I am. I say I'm a Christian, and therefore suffer some oppression and some loss. So that's the second one when we come to facing legal suits in our lives. Verse 41 has the third one. This one here is whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Now, I think this has been, I didn't necessarily find this myself in my studies, but I think I've heard it being explained in this way. In the times of Jesus Christ, that the Roman soldiers, or the soldiers of their day, it was common for them somewhat to demand of the civil population as they went through a town to pick someone out to carry their backpack, or it wasn't backpack at that, but that's the thought, their artillery or their provisions for 1 mile. I've heard that was something that was done in the day and age of the time of Jesus Christ here. So this made quite a bit more sense to the people on the Sermon on the Mount than it does to you and I this morning, outside of the historical concept of the soldiers requiring you to carry their gear for 1 mile. So this verse 34 is the government, we could say, are the government's demands that are placed upon us. The first mile. So we see here that at that time Jesus was saying that, well, if someone someone requires that the soldier requires you to carry his provisions or his things for 1 mile, allow your light to shine and go with him twain, and go with him twice the amount, or another time as far. So we see here in verse 43 that the government demands that a Christian is subject to civil rules and authority, and a Christian should pray for, honor, and respect civil rulers. Now, I've been in Lancaster County, or I've had my eyes open, or I have observed the Mennonite community in our day and age, or in our setting here today, long enough to know that when we go before the local municipality, to especially in the area of acquiring permits to do such and such a thing, I have observed in not necessarily our circles, in the Mennonite community, that it depends largely on what kind of attitude you have when you go and walk into the local government men that serve on that board voluntarily. What is the attitude that you and I have when we want to acquire some permit or some kind of a permission to do certain things in the local government that you and I live under? When we come into the meetings with the attitude that I have, this is what I need, and this is how I'm going to do it, and you're just going to hand out a permit for me, well, guess what? You just might have a pretty tough time acquiring a permit, and there have been Mennonite men, much to our shame, that have marred their testimony tremendously because they have not honored their local civil authority when it comes to living in obedience to what is required of us to do, to live and to prosper and to build under the local jurisdiction that we're protected by. We want to go in and tell them how we're going to do it, when we want to do it, and expect them to jump and oh yes, you can, oh yeah, and the permit, no problem. It's by far better going in and asking them, what is it going to take so that I possibly may acquire the proper permits? Or what is the legal, what must I do? I'm asking. Ask. Don't demand. We mar our testimony tremendously when we go in and act like it's no big deal, or we're exempt from certain things when possibly we're not, and we bully our way in, like bull in a china shop, and demand things where they are a group of individuals from our maybe our neighbor serving on that same board voluntarily, and he sees us coming, you and I, Christians, coming in and demanding things, and not being a humble servant, or not coming in asking, what will it take to appease, or what must I do to go through the proper avenues and have a proper response and allow our testimony to be advanced tremendously, instead of our testimony to be harmed maybe forever in the local in civil authority that we operate under. So we have a tremendous, when it comes to the thought of non-resistance, it again, time and time again, it goes back to our attitude and the attitude that we have behind when we are faced faced with strife or faced with difficulties, or either demanding things that are outside of what we what we maybe deserve or expect them to bend their proper procedures to appease you, when everybody else got to go through the proper channels to acquire what we have come in to require. So when we think about the 1 mile or 2 mile, the first mile or the second mile, many times you and I, and speaking about myself, I only want to do what's required. I only want to go 1 mile. And I think most of you do too. We only want to do what is required. We don't want to. How many of us, if we want to continue to teach and to preach and uphold the doctrine of non-resistance, how many of us are willing to model the second mile? Am I willing to model the second mile? The next generation, the children that are coming, are they? We always stop, Dad, Mom, Dad, Grandpa. We always stop at the first mile. We never, ever see it modeled going to the second mile, going the second mile. And Jesus is saying, when we are required to go 1 mile, do it the second mile. And that will teach, or that will allow us to have a platform or a lifestyle that the next generation can grasp what it means to resist not, or what it means to have the attitude that I only do what I'm required to, and I never, ever see it modeled going the second mile. And that is a tremendous challenge for me too. I'm preaching to myself the second mile. I never model the second mile. I only do. Everything comes down to, everything in my life, most everything I do in my life comes down to is what has to be done. The fourth one, verse 42. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn thou not away. Now here's where it may really hurt at times. This one we could call financial requests. Jesus says, give to him. Now this morning, I don't want to make any excuses for myself or take this out of context of what Jesus was trying to teach here. I think as stewards of what God has given to us, I don't think that means we just go out and hand out Benjamins or to anybody and everybody that we meet without some accountability. But I also, on the other hand, I believe that there is a lot to be learned here when Jesus, this is all under the same teaching of non-resistance or the attitude that we have of those that have, when the requests come and when there's a legitimate need of that individual, when the individual that comes and asks, if there is a legitimate need, I believe we need to sit up and pay attention to when there is a legitimate need. Now, oftentimes, we may be caught at an inconvenient time where we have very little time to decipher whether it's a legitimate need or not. And that has happened to me a few times in life, where I didn't have the time to decipher if this was a legitimate need or not. And I have already given money, but I've tried to be very careful when I don't have time to decipher whether it's a legitimate need or not. Probably the amount is probably less than what it should be when I don't have time to dialogue whether there's a legitimate need or not. But when we have, and here again, this goes back to the fact of the first or the second mile. I don't want to take the time to decipher. I don't have the time. I'm busy. I got things to do. I got my own agenda. I don't have the time to decipher if this person has a legitimate need or not. So I don't go the second mile. Therefore, I don't give. And here we see that Jesus, when he's talking about the whole idea or the attitude of non-resistance, that when we have we do our homework, we analyze, or we dialogue, we spend time, or we figure out whether it's actually a legitimate need, or whether it's a scam, or they want they want just cash only to feed an illegal substance abuse or that type of thing. We need to be careful in the day and age that we live in. But that is where we need to decipher and to do our homework when it says, give to him, which verse was that? 42. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow thee, turn thou not away. I believe that Jesus Christ commands us here to have a generous and compassionate attitude towards the needy. That, I think, is bottom line of what Jesus Christ here is teaching here. It can't be, I don't think it's outside of that. When I have a generous and compassionate attitude towards the needy, you will probably, if that is how I live, and if that's how you live, you will probably take the 5-10 minutes or take some time to decipher whether it's illegitimate or whether it's a legitimate need or not, whether the person truly is needy or not. Or when we have the attitude, oh, well, I'm busy, I'm doing my own thing, life is too important, my things are too important, that I don't have the time to see if this is actually a need or not. And if there is a need, do I give what I can, or do I help out when I can? And I believe we are commanded to do so. And when we don't have that attitude, or the attitude towards helping the needy, what am I saying? I'm saying my needs, or maybe not my needs, the day and age that I live in, the lifestyle that I'm living, the lifestyle that my money affords me to live is more important to me than reaching out to the legitimate needs of the poor or the needy among us. My attitude is wrong because I want to continue to afford the lifestyle that I'm used to, and I never consider that maybe I should suffer some oppression when it comes to what God has blessed me when it comes to helping others. Have I ever done that? Have you ever done that? That is a heart of love, not because I have to, but because I want to. I prove it by my actions. And that's how it is. That's, I believe, how it is when now most people in society, I believe, unless they're under the influence of substance abuse or something like that, most people, when they have the courage, when they build up the courage to come and ask you, someone you don't know, a stranger, when they build up the courage, most people, I'm saying most, have the courage to come and ask you for help. I believe that there's probably some needs there outside of substance abuse and that type of thing, where they just got to have the next high. And that's unfortunate. So when Jesus, what Jesus is, again, I don't want to continually think about but I want to challenge you as I challenge myself. Jesus is commanding you and I to be generous and compassionate and have that attitude towards the needy. And it wasn't, and of course we could go the Rich Man and Lazarus. You know, that's an ideal teaching of Jesus Christ, where the rich man had abundance to give to Lazarus and supply his needs, and he didn't see it. He was blinded by the lifestyle he was living. What about us today? I can't be generous, and I'm not compassionate because I want to protect the lifestyle that I'm living. I don't see or don't take the time. I only go the first mile. And this morning, as we think about the title of the message, the first mile, again, the first mile is what is required, is maybe what's required of me. The second mile is the voluntary one. And I challenge in these four areas, as Jesus is teaching non-resistance, the physical attacks, the right cheek, turn the other cheek, the legal suits that may come, the government demands, the financial requests touching a lot of areas in our lives where we don't like to be touched. The physical, the character, or the attacks that may come, or the reaching into our wallets, the things we like to to think that are ours. Those are the tough ones. And I only ever go the first mile, and I never stretch, or I never allow myself to think, well, God, what would you really want? Would this be an excellent opportunity to go the second mile? And believe me, there's at least one or two situations in my life right now where I have to ask myself that question. Am I willing to go the second mile? Why do I have to ask myself that? Because it's all going to take time. And do I want to get involved or not? Or do I want to protect what I think is my time? The second mile will never happen because I don't think it's not required of me. I never consider. So if we are as a group of Anabaptists outside of being Mennonite, as a group of people that believe in modeling and following after the teachings of Jesus Christ, the idea of resisting not, we have a responsibility as mothers and fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers that we model it and display it so the next generation doesn't only get taught in word, but seeing it done is by far more, teaches by far more than what I can do over the pulpit on a Sunday morning. At the end of the message here, I taught some non-resistant teaching a while ago, a number of years ago, and someone gave me this short story here I would like to read to you at this time. It's on being a good neighbor. A new neighbor, extremely irate, called Clifford. "Your dog was here during the night and killed half my chickens. What are you going to do about it?" He shouted angrily into the phone. "I'll be right over," said Clifford. There would be a few things more immediately distressing to him than an unhappy neighbor, especially a newcomer. Clifford was a minister of the gospel in word and in deed. A kindly, gentle person, everyone thought highly of him, and there was never a whisper of doubt about his sincerity, and he had little experience with belligerent neighbors. Clifford drove down the road, wondering how he could appease the man. When he got there, he found his neighbor standing in the barnyard among his dead chickens. He glared at Clifford and said, "What are you going to do?" he asked, and adding a few ungracious words. Glaring at him, Clifford said, "How much do you think they are worth?" Clifford asked, unruffled. The neighbor named an obviously inflated sum. "Why?" Or no, wrong emphasis. "Why?" said Clifford benignly. "I will give you more than that. I would not want any neighbor to be shortchanged in any way." Taking his wallet from his pocket, he dug out more than enough bills. It was a response the neighbor was scarcely prepared for. He hesitated briefly and then, blushing deeply, accepted them. As time passed, a long time passed before the neighbor learned that Clifford did not own a dog and never had. This one peaceable act was worth more than 100 sermons, and not only to the neighbor. Since good neighbors begat good neighbors, what price are we ready to pay? What lengths are we willing to go? What self-sacrifice are we minded to make? Sometime we hope to enter heaven. Imagine coming to us at the door scores of neighbors, employees, business associates, once dysfunctional people. Could it be that they once made their choice to go there because our witness to them rang true? Let's kneel for a word of prayer. God, again this morning, we are ever grateful, forever indebted to the teachings of your only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, as he walked here on this earth. Thank you again, God, for the Holy Spirit that takes up residence in our hearts. And God, we understand, or I understand this morning, that some of these areas that we're called to, loving our neighbors as ourselves, they are so tough to do, go against the very nature that wants to well up within us. But God, again this morning, as we take your scripture and we expound it upon it this morning, hopefully for your honor and for your glory, that you would forgive us where we have failed. And God, as we embark on this new year, may we And I ask myself, is it time that we consider more often or a keener desire to go the second mile? God, that we could model it for the next generation and allow our lights to shine brightly and not mar our testimony by doing otherwise. God, again, we pray for wisdom in this congregation, for all the people that are gathered in this morning as we think about, and this fleshes out in many different, non-resistance fleshes out in many different ways. And in a church as large as this congregation, God, I thank you for the unity we have enjoyed, where I can lay maybe my preferences down for the preferences of my brother. That's non-resistance. That is working together. And God, as we display that to each other as brothers and sisters, that we would, again, not do it because we have to, but because we want to. God, our attitude in how I respond, how each of us respond when difficulties and when strife and personal attacks come. God, would you give us a heart that allows you and your light to receive the honor and the glory. Thank you again for each one that's here this morning. May your word continue to speak to us in Jesus' precious name. Amen.